Do you think China will ever invade Australia?
I think, look, to me, the greatest fear is Finlandization. Now, what is Finlandization? Essentially, Finlandization is a sort of political concept that refers to Finland's approach to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. They were right on the border of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had invaded them prior to World War II. They'd been at war together. And so Finland essentially said to the Soviet Union, we will be completely politically neutral in exchange for maintaining our nominal independence. So to maintain their nominal independence so that the Soviet Union would not outright militarily invade them and occupy them and annex them, what they did is they censored all criticism of the Soviet Union within Finland. The political system, the radios, like radio broadcasts were censored. The political system, nobody would ever criticize the Soviet Union and its human rights record. Everything was censored. They would literally take books off the shelf. And there was massive economic pressure and leverage and influence over Finland. So this is what Finlandization essentially is. It's essentially you get to be independent, but you're only independent in name only. And I think that
you're basically the bitch of the country.
Yeah, essentially. And I think that is the realistic I think that's realistically the worst case scenario that we could potentially face when it comes to China. My worst case scenario is if America and Trump were to go full isolationist and abandon Taiwan to China. My fear would be that all across Asia, countries would then start bending the knee because they realize that there's no defense against the Chinese Communist Party. They're too militarily powerful. And so the only path forward would be Finlandization. And my biggest fear would be China invades, takes Taiwan with the acquiescence of America. And the outcome of that would be that there's probably like a fall of government in Australia. And the government is reconstituted by basically people who are that are pro-China to an extent that we've never seen before by mainstream Australian politicians. So
we would see cutting of ties to the UK, to Europe.
Yeah, cutting of ties to cutting all ties to Western countries, full censorship within the Australian media and Australian political system of criticism of the Chinese government. We would have dissidents, we'd have an extradition treaty with China. And so, Chinese Australians who've criticized the Chinese Communist Party, Uyghurs, Tibetans, Australians potentially like me, we would be at threat. We would potentially be handed over. I think that is the worst case scenario, right? The worst case scenario would be like a government that's basically led by somebody like Paul Keating or Bob Carr. Essentially, these guys who want full-blown capitulation to China. My fear would be that the shock of an invasion of Taiwan and the shock of an American withdrawal from Asia would shatter Australia's political system. Like the major parties would be shattered, and there'd be some kind of new government that forms of the pro-China appeasement types, essentially.
Yeah.
Bootlickers, and it'd be like people like Bob Carr, they're old now, but a younger generation like that. And if we were to go full Finlandization, we would have full censorship of political opinions in Australia. Nobody could criticize the Chinese government in Australia. There'd be massive economic ties. We would essentially be a vassal state. And somebody like me, I'd probably have to leave Australia and live in exile because I'd probably be at risk. So I think that's the worst case scenario.
This is what's really scary about American isolationism, which is happening. And look, I understand the psyche of that. I understand some of the people within America who are saying that. Why are we fighting these foreign wars?
Yeah.
And I detest the lack of gratitude that the rest of the world has to America.
Yeah.
After World War II, what they did was unprecedented. They helped rebuild the nations of those who were their enemies. Okay, and basically, without America, pretty much the entire Western world is effed. We are completely effed.
You're right in the sense that Europe has been freeloading on defense for too long.
Yes.
So that is certainly the case. My worry is that it goes beyond just wanting Europe to rearm. My worry is that they want a realignment, right?
Yeah.
And so my fear is, you see recently Europe and Germany have been talking about rearming, about responding to the recent events by rearming, and they've been attacked by some very senior figures in the sort of American Republican right for the prospect of rearming. So my worry is that it's not just a negotiating tactic to try and encourage the Europeans and other Western countries to increase military spending. My worry is that potentially Trump wants a world that is divided along spheres of influence. And Europe would fall under the sphere of influence of Russia. North America and all of the Americas would be the sphere of influence of America. And as part of that, all of Asia, including Australia and New Zealand, would be abandoned to China. That's my big fear, right? And in such a world, I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I'd do. I would obviously try and fight my best. But if it were to be the case that the Australian government were to become an appeasement government, if the Australian government were to basically become a collaborationist government, if we were to have like a Vichy type regime in Australia, obviously I'd try to see what my prospects are to fight here, stay and fight, because this is my country, this is my home, this is where I want my children to live, this is the place that I love.
Australia's awesome.
I've got no other place. I've got no other citizenship. I've only an Australian citizenship. I've got nowhere else to go. I would love to stand and fight. But if it were to get to the point where, you know, people like me were being rounded up because we were critics of the Chinese government, I don't know what I would do. That's the scary thing, potentially being forced from my home into exile. So this is the worst case scenario that I potentially see for the next couple decades.
Worst case scenario is true. Worst case scenarios do happen. I mean, who would have thought in 1930s Europe that you'd think what was just around the corner?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it made me think about the Australian forces at the moment. I think we've only got 57,000 active personnel.
It's not enough.
That's nothing. That's
not
enough to basically fill half the Melbourne Cricket Ground stadium. It's nothing.
It's not,
and you've got a continent the size of the USA.
It's not enough. And essentially at the moment, while we're waiting for the AUKUS submarines, we often only have 1 or 2 submarines in actual operation because the rest are refueling or under maintenance.
You've got the personnel.
So simply, this is simply what we have to be thinking about in Australia. We need to be thinking 5% GDP on defence. I think at the moment we're spending like 2%. We might have to double, even potentially triple that. We will have to go onto essentially a full-blown total mobilisation defence footing. We would have to look at the model of, say, Sweden or Finland, which have, you know, millions of reservist forces, millions in the citizen, millions of people in Sweden and Finland are trained to fight to defend their country.
Yeah.
We would have to look at that. We would have to look at 5% GDP in defence. We'd have to look at turning Australia into a defence fortress that could never be bullied or invaded. And we'd have to go nuclear energy. We'd have to go full self-reliance on energy. We'd essentially have to go full-blown French Gaullism. Self-reliance. That's unfortunately what we'd have to do. Nuclear energy. We also have to look at a nuclear defense deterrent.
I was amazed.
Nuclear missiles as a deterrent.
Yeah. Well, I was amazed to learn that in Switzerland, within sort of 24 hours, they can get everyone ready for it. Like everyone has like the military training. They know how to operate a rifle. They know how to bullets work. You know, they know everything.
I think this is what we have to
basic military training for everyone coming out of school, essentially. Just to have that level of awareness.
Yeah. I think this is unfortunately. This is the reality. This is the funny thing, right? Like you have the Greens and the leftists who go like, "Oh, end the US alliance, end the US alliance. We hate America." The funny thing is, okay,
these are the last people that don't want to go to war.
But this is the funny thing, right? Like, okay, end the US alliance. Do you know what that means? That means we're spending 5 to 10% of GDP on defense. We're doubling our forces. We're like training every high school leaver in like basic military survivalism.
All of your humanities groups at universities will now need to go and learn how to fight in the trenches. Like, do you realize what this means?
So that's the funny thing, right? Like these Australian Greens, the leftists who are like, we hate America because they're American imperialists. Let's cut off America. Okay, like if we cut off America and we're on our own, that's 5% GDP defense spending. That's like doubling where we are. Full blown like we're going to have like probably a year of service for all young people. We're going to have millions of people trained in survivalism and basic infantry, basic military tactics. Like we would have to turn Australia into a fortress. That's the reality of if we don't have, and also it also means nuclear energy and nukes as well. We'd have to have our own nuclear deterrent. So I don't know whether the Australian Greens, they look at that future. Oh, let's close Pine Gap and end the US alliance. Okay, are you guys happy with doing an Australian nuclear deterrent? Are you guys happy with, you know, training 1 million Australians in the reserves? Like that's the reality. That's where we're going.
But this is the problem with the Greens. You know, I came from the environmentalist world. That was my background.
I was in the Greens. I was literally in the Greens for 9 months when I was like 18, 19. I can't even believe it. I'm shocked that I was that lefty at one point.
It appeals to the common denominators. We all want to care about the planet, right?
Yeah.
But it's deadly naive, right? And actually, the Green parties have now become what you call watermelons, not because of the Palestinian symbol, green on the outside, socialist on the inside.
That's what it is.
And they're just aligning with all these maligned groups against the West.
I can't believe, dude. I actually can't. I'm shocked that I once was in the Greens. I've repudiated that part of myself so much. Like I was young, left, naive. The thing is, this is the funny thing, right? Like their naive view of the world. We can all sit around the campfire, sing Kumbaya. That's not happening. If we cut the US alliance, okay, Australia's going nuclear. We're going to have a nuclear defense deterrent. We're going to have nuclear missiles. We're going to have to double, triple defense spending. We're going to have a year of military service for young people, training millions of people in defense. We'd have to look at what Switzerland does, what Sweden does, what Finland does, and they're prepared for full total society mobilization to defend.
Oh yeah, they're ready.
Yeah.
They're ready.
So that's the funny thing, right? If they want to go, let's cut the US alliance. Okay, are you guys happy with a nuclear defense? Are you happy with Australian nuclear submarines having nukes attached to them. Are you guys happy with full-blown total societal mobilization? That's what we're going to have to do to defend Australia from an invasion.
Like, are you ready to like start raising your kids to get ready for war if they have to?
That.
Are you ready to stop sipping your soy lattes and just hanging out on the beach? Are you ready to actually do that?
This is the sad thing, right? Like, I actually don't want that world. I would like it if the current system where America extends its nuclear umbrella to its allies. And so countries like Australia don't have to worry about being invaded. I like that system. What we have right now is good. But if they're the ones cheering on Trump cutting the alliances and they're the ones cheering on ending the US alliance, okay, you guys have to be ready because we're going to unfortunately have to have the same model that Sweden and Finland and Switzerland have, which is full-blown societal mobilization. And I don't want that. No. This is another thing people get wrong with me. People call me a warmonger. I'm not a warmonger. I don't want war. Yeah. I'm trying to prepare our societies from aggressive forces that want to invade.
Prevent war.
I want to prevent war, exactly. Yes. And the problem is, the countries that want war, China, Russia, Iran, they're on the march. They're the aggressive ones. They're the ones who dream of war. Yeah. They're the ones that dream of bloodshed. I don't want war. I would like things to stay how they are. Yeah. I don't want Australian youth to have to think about the prospect growing up to defend the country from an invasion. I don't want that even to be a prospect. I would like a world of peace. Unfortunately, if you disarm in the face of people who want to destroy you, it's suicide. It's just suicide. Unfortunately, that's what it is. China, Russia, Iran, they've made themselves so clear. They've made themselves so clear. There's literally a land war in Europe right now. Russian soldiers are invading a European country with North Korean troops. They're bombing European cities every single day. This is happening as we speak. Iran just basically set the Middle East on fire for the past 2 years. They love war. They dream of war, these people. And I want to prevent war. I'm not a warmonger. I just want us to be in a position where we have enough to back up we can back ourselves up with enough force that they don't want to attack us. That's a deterrent. That's what I want.
What's that quote? If you fail to prepare to fail.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I forget the exact thing, but it's like if you want to prepare, if you want peace, prepare for war. That's essentially that's unfortunately where we're at right now.
Okay, well, listen, it's quite a bleak picture that we're talking about here. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to get any brighter for the rest of this conversation because I want to dive into...
We're in such a dark time in history.
Precisely.
For the West, maybe it's the darkest time since the 30s.
I think I'd agree with that, yeah. But I wanted to get onto the topic of Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
You just landed from Ukraine yesterday where you were on the front lines. Now, look, many people are confused about this conflict. Yeah. I'm confused about the war in Russia and Ukraine. And there's people that are concerned about profiteering and warmongering and escalation. And I think those are valid concerns in any war. I remain annoyingly agnostic and on the fence about this. And I'd rather get to the bottom of understanding the situation. Can I just get your quick thoughts on that initial summary?
Yeah. Let me tell you what I saw in Ukraine. And I think the best way for me to respond here is just to tell you what I saw with my own eyes in Ukraine 4 or 5 days ago.